Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Friday Night Young at Heart, featuring nursery rhymes, stories, songs, poems, Mother Goose, Aesop's Fables, Lewis Carroll, limericks, larks, epics, stories of the great operas, and such, to keep us all young at heart. I'm Father James DeLucio. Tonight, I have a very interesting little story to tell you. It comes from a book that I purchased during COVID, when all the libraries were closed and we had to buy books. Well, this is called The Oxford Companion to Fairy Tales. Are you surprised that I purchased this book? Probably not. Well, you know how sometimes with religious books like the Bible or whatever our favorite texts are, religious texts, sometimes we say, I don't know what I want to read. I'll just open up the Bible and whatever page opens and read something. Well, that's what I did with this companion of fairy tales for you. So I found this page with the story of the singing, ringing tree. I think I came to it because remember our story from a few weeks ago from the Arabian Nights? The shimmering tree and the singing bird and all that? Well, nevertheless, here we have a screenplay, an original fairy tale that was very popular in Germany in 1960 and beyond. It was written and directed by a fellow named, ready? Francesco Stefani. Now, you can't get more German than that, right? Right. And it was in southern Germany. So, those Italians and Germans, going back and forth over the border. Nevertheless, the name of this movie was called The Singing Soaring Lark. And it was inspired by Grimm's fairy tales, but it's not a direct, literate translation of a Grimm's fairy tale or edition or version of a Grimm's fairy tale. He made it up all by himself. Now, there are allusions to some of the Grimms, and please put them in the comments if you come across them. There's 4 of you, pretty much maybe a 5th, who are pretty faithful and at least giving me a little comment from time to time. Thank you. It keeps me going. But without the comments, I have no idea if I'm relating and if you're relating. Well, let's get on with the story, shall we? Okay, so put in the comments if you're so inspired what other Grimm's fairy tales this one reminds you of. The Singing Soaring Lark tells the story of a very haughty, self-willed princess. Imagine. Her name is Princess Thousand Beauty. And she refuses the courtship of all these royal young men, princes mostly, who come courting her. And the last suitor, she was particularly adamant she'll have nothing to do with him unless he brings to her the fabled but hitherto unattainable tree, a singing, what did we say? A singing, ringing tree. Even though that's not the title of the movie, it's called The Singing Soaring Lark. Well, hold on. So the prince goes out in search of the tree. And guess what? He finds it. And typical in these tales, he can't just cut it down or unearth it and bring it home in a pot because it's guarded by a dwarf. Yes, a dwarf with magical powers. Now, the dwarf doesn't want to give up his magical, singing, shining tree. Can't blame him. But he says, I will. Because he's a mischievous dwarf. And he said, you may have it. You can have it for a day. And you can bring it to the princess even. But she has to fall in love with you before the sun sets. Or well, there'll be consequences. So he takes off the tree, it's still a living tree. Thankfully, he didn't cut it down. And when he brings it to her, it doesn't sing, it doesn't ring. And she refuses him. She rejects him. But because she rejects him, and of course now there's no sense of her love. In any case, it was all dependent on the gift of the tree, which isn't really the best type of love anyway. He, as punishment, turns into a bear. And she doesn't get away with this Princess Thousand Beauty. She turns into an ugly ogress. Now, is that redundant? Are all ogresses ugly? I don't know. But beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, after all. So now what are they going to do? Well, the bear carries her off into the forest. Doesn't say whether with her agreement because she's mortified and doesn't want to stay in the castle, or if he carries her off against her will. I do not know. But the two set up a humble little cottage in the forest. Now, this is what's so interesting. Time passes, as time always does, but the couple become really enamored of nature, most particularly our ogress princess. And she really learns to ponder the beauty of the earth and all the woodland animals. She befriends them. She cares for them. She learns about the birds, too, and she takes time to marvel at the various colors and shapes of the fish in the river that flows through the forest. And so it happens that with each act of kindness towards any of these creatures, her ogressness, her ugliness, begins to fade away. And little by little, in time, mind you, in time, she returns to her former beauty. And because of the kindness of the bear and his help in providing for their livelihood, she indeed falls in love with him, and he returns to his former gallant looks of, well, being handsome and all that, right? And so guess what? They live happily ever after as a married prince and princess. And as often true in these tales, that poor dwarf, who is up to a lot of mischief, though, we have to say, like another dwarf in another fairy tale, put it in the comments, please. Please. He stamps and stamps and stamps, and he disappears into the ground and is never seen or heard from again. Pretty nice story, huh? Now you can tell that to your children and your grandchildren and your nieces and nephews. I know I will. I'm going to visit them. I'm going to visit them in just a couple weeks. So, next Friday night will be our final Young at Heart for a few weeks. But I hope you continue to open the books and share a tale or two with friends like me and friends like you and the little kids and the old ones as well. Thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Have a wonderful weekend. God bless. Good night.